Let's get started. So welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. My name is David Carnes. Today we're going to talk about Salesforce security and permissions for reports and dashboards. So if you haven't been to the dojo before, the word dojo in Japanese, the two kanji characters up in the top left essentially mean a place to learn the way. And I spent 3 years in Japan, really loved seeing dojos in different parts of the country. And what I love the most was that there were people from all different ability levels and all different ages that were learning together. We have over 30 hours of recordings. We're probably creeping up to 40 hours now. They're on the dojo website. There's the recordings tab. The most recent one is up now, and it's we store them on YouTube, but it's we did a session basically taking an Excel report that somebody was manually creating. This was an operating partner at a private equity firm for one of the portfolio companies. And we basically broke down, he and I spent 90 minutes together figuring out how do we build this in Salesforce? And we had to go create a bunch of things. And we used a joined report to make it happen. So that's that recording. Hopefully it's useful to you. So for our agenda, I'll do quick introductions. We'll talk about our sponsor, and then we'll get into the topics for today. I'll share about an upcoming training class that I'm teaching and the upcoming dojo topics. As always, if you have suggestions for dojo topics, let's hear them. And we can take Q&A throughout. It's a small group, and Kyle and I will be watching the chat. So let us know, and we can dive into something. So again, my name is David Carnes. I'm the founder and chairman of OpFocus. This past 7 or 8 months, I've been the Boston admin group leader. So it took me 18 years after I first attended a user group meeting to become a user group leader. I'm a slow learner, I guess. But last week we were in New York City for the New York World Tour, which was super cool. And I was invited up to the Ohana floor, which is the top floor of the Salesforce Tower. In a lot of the cities around the world, they have a very special floor, and it's beautiful. So this was the view looking south down Manhattan on this kind of cool cloudy day. So OpFocus is our sponsor. Both Kyle and I work at OpFocus. OpFocus works with SaaS companies to scale go-to-market operations. So we're a consulting firm. We've been doing Salesforce consulting since 2006. Kyle Shagnon, who's on today, is our events manager. Hello, Kyle.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Thank you for doing what you do, Kyle. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So there's kind of a couple different security related topics, and I realize this isn't like the sexiest topic in the world. However, there are things that impact our reporting experience in a couple different ways. So the first is just permissions for reports and dashboards. I've probably talked about this on 20 different dashboard dojos, but what I thought we could do today is actually look in the summer 23 release and see, are there any new report and dashboard permissions that we should be aware of? And I also want to talk to you about these, basically setting up users on profiles and permission sets to take advantage of the reporting functionality. Another level down, what your users will see when they run a report or look at a dashboard is impacted by these profile and permission set level object and field level security permissions. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll shift gears and talk about who gets to see what reports and dashboards. Hopefully all of the reports and dashboards in your system are not available to everyone. It's not even so much to hide them, like hide sensitive data, as it is to keep people sane. And your CEO should absolutely not see everything. So when she logs into the system, she should not see every report and every dashboard. So it's contrary to popular belief, but please don't inflict that pain upon them. So we can use folders, and in Lightning, we can nest folders and we can share folders. And we'll talk about folders impact on a new feature. So I was glad to see the new feature on the analytics tab called collections, and we'll talk more about it in the next dojo when we do the summer 23 release review. But collections is kind of a game changer. It's a cool thing, and it respects the folder permissions. Then we're going to get into who sees what data, and this is important. So the first dojo we did almost 3 years ago was called Fun with Filters. I think that's what we called it. And filtering is a big part of all reporting, right? So you might have 1 million accounts in your system. Typically, when you create a report, you don't want to see all of them. but you do want your reports to be predictable, right? So every time somebody runs a report, you kind of want the filter to work correctly. And having an understanding of the underlying data visibility controls in your system will impact your ability to understand what ends up on the report. So said another way, if you have Sally, sales rep, and Marty, the marketing guy, and they both run a report, and it's the same report with the same filters, they may not see the same results. And the reason for this is this data visibility setup in your system. And that what I thought, rather than going super deep, is to just talk through, there are a bunch of different ways that control who sees what, and these will have downstream impacts on your success in reporting. So we'll talk about those. And if you ever need to troubleshoot something like, why can Sally sales rep see this, but Sammy sales rep can't? And they're on the same team, you think, gosh, they should really see the same things, but they sometimes don't. And it's because of the data visibility topics. So before we get started, thought to ask Kyle to launch a poll and just see, which of these things have you guys used before? And it's totally fine if you say none. But have you made changes to report and dashboard settings, profiles, permission sets, report and dashboard folders, data sharing controls? This is a multi-select, so just curious for the folks on the call today. Awesome. So it looks like most of you have touched profiles. It looks like most of you have touched permission sets, and also nearly all of you have done report and dashboard folders, and then sort of drops off from there. And we have some folks that are new. Okay, great. So this is what I expected. So why don't we dive right in? Thank you, Kyle, for showing the poll. Did you share the results? I'm sorry. Is that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So if you've been on a Dōjō, you've probably heard me talk about this article I wrote. It's almost 4 years ago that I wrote the article, but it's largely still true. In fact, it's mostly still true that there are about 30 permissions on profiles and permission sets, which impact your ability to create and run reports and create and run dashboards. And only 4 of them are set by default on a standard user profile. So this is a little bit of a problem, especially when it comes to super users, right? So sysadmins always have the ability to pretty much do everything. So sysadmins don't realize that the people in the middle, who are often your best report and dashboard writers, don't often have the permissions. And for those of you on the call that aren't sysadmins, I want you to advocate for yourself. So this particular article is one I wrote, and what I did in the article, and I'll just show it to you now, is basically I defined 5 groups of users: end users, and this is what I think end users should have for permissions: managers, report and dashboard super users, report and dashboard admins, and sysadmins. Now you may have fewer groups, or you may have more granular groups depending on the size of your organization and your reporting needs. But basically I went through and said, hey, these are what I think end users should have. And one of them that is not set by default is subscribe to dashboards in Lightning. So it's crazy that users can subscribe to reports in Lightning by default, but they can't subscribe to dashboards. And if we keep going down the list, for managers, typically I think end users typically don't need to export data, but they're given it by default. But managers probably do. And then the ability to subscribe to reports and dashboards and subscribe others. And this list is additive. So I would think that if you had a permission set for end users and a permission set for managers, you'd assign both of them to a manager so they'd be covered. So I think Kyle put the link to the article just above.
Yeah, I'm putting it in now. I accidentally posted to host and panelist by accident.
Oh, okay. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us, Cindy. And when we scroll down a little further, this is really the big group that I'm most concerned about. Like, having the full range of access as an admin of dashboards or creator of dashboards. It seems crazy. This seems kind of innocuous, but the ability to change dashboard colors is something you might want to ask for. the ability to create and customize dashboards, create dashboard folders, edit my dashboards, edit my reports, and so on. So manage dashboards and folders, manage dynamic dashboards. So this is a long list. So anyway, hopefully that's useful to you. Let's actually go do an example of this. So 2 people just joined our organization who will own reporting for their teams. We need to set them up for success using permission sets. They've already been created for end users and managers. So let's create a super user permission set. And we can just use the example here, and we're going to check a bunch of boxes. And while we're in there, we'll see, are there any new ones that we could use? So if I go into setup and I expand users, and then take a look at permission sets. So first, as always, you want to make sure the permission set doesn't already exist. And I don't see that kind of thing. You may want to use a standard naming scheme. So it could be report and dashboard permissions hyphen end users, report and dashboard permissions hyphen managers. And that way you see them all together alphabetically. So I'll use that formula, that naming scheme here. So report and dashboard permissions super user. And I can go ahead and click save. And now what I can do is go right into the permission set. And the area we want to look at is system permissions. So we'll dive right into that. And we just have this long, long list that has gotten longer and longer as the years have gone by. But I've got my list here. So you see I've got it all alphabetized because that's how I copied them from the original list. But if I get the zoom thing out of the way, come back here. So, one thing you could do, you could use a Control F in your browser and look for the word report, look for the word dashboard. But if I come down here, I can see change dashboard colors is one of them. Create and customize dashboards, create dashboard folders, and so on. So if we come down here, we want to, really try to be thorough and stay aware when there are new releases to, are there more things? And you notice when I just check the box, create dashboard folders, there's a little I next to it. And it says, in order to be able to check this box, it will automatically check another box, which is create and customize dashboards. And that's one that would probably be assigned by another permission potentially. But anyway, so this is how we do it. We just, scroll down through the list, and we could spend some time hunting for, there's a bunch of CRM analytics ones, CRM analytics data flow, data set. This is related to CRM analytics. Here we go. Edit my dashboards, edit my reports, and so on. So we just really just go right through this list. There's a bulk of them in the word subscribe, and some of these we gave to the managers. But just to know that there's a bunch of them here.
Hi, David. A
Yep.
question came in from Carol. If they have permission like change dashboard colors, they are only allowed to do this on dashboards they create, or are they able to do it on all dashboards?
It would be all dashboards that are in folders where they have edit permission. So, so the folder controls are important for this as well. So if you did want to allow people to edit dashboards, but not change the color on all dashboards, you would want to put them in folders that they don't have edit access to, and then they can't change the dashboard. Awesome. All right, great question. All right, so I won't go further. You set up all those permissions, save it, and then assign it to the appropriate users, and then suddenly they have more power in Salesforce. And the thing to know about permission sets is they don't reduce your access to anything. You're only given more. So think of them as layering on top of a profile and just giving you perhaps a little bit more. So we also have the ability to control object and field permissions. And so these are important to know as a report writer, because every now and then you're like, I know the column's there. Come on, stupid, the column's there. Why don't you see the column? Well, if the field level security is set so they can't read that field, it's as if the field doesn't exist at all. So every profile offers object permissions. Profiles also offer field permissions. If we come um, back into this permission set that we're working on, and let's say I just saved this little bit of work that I've done. I didn't finish the list, but don't tell anyone. But if I come back in here and instead of the permission set overview, if we looked at object settings, we can actually come right in here. And we can see, I could go to accounts, for example, and I can see this screen that I'm looking at, object permissions and field permissions. So Don asked the question, when would you do that to profiles versus permission sets? Well, this is a big thing. Profiles existed. So way back in the beginning, profiles existed. And permission sets were only a dream, right? When the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And then permission sets were created, and it sort of like depends. And a lot of our orgs are sort of this like mongrel of mixtures of profiles and permission sets. Well, the future is aiming all at permission sets. And over the next couple of years, Salesforce will be reducing what profiles can do and putting more of it in this concept of permission sets. I like the idea of permission sets for this because it's just cleaner. You might have a base level company profile, and it includes the very base level of access to reporting. And you might use that profile as and you clone it for creating other profiles, but you have base level reporting in your profile. And then you might use permission sets for manager permissions, super user permissions, etc. So that might be an idea for you, Donna. All right, so what are we talking about here? We have the ability, either profile by profile or permission set by permission set. So permission sets only grant more access. So we're not restricting anything. And that may be another answer to your question, Donna, that if your profile says you can't delete, you can't delete unless you have a permission set granting delete. So some of these things we probably need to do still down at the profile level. But the ability to read data in an object is controlled by your profile. And then there's another one here called view all, and this could mess up all the rest of your permissions on the object. If you give somebody view all, then they see everything. So they see all the data visibility. So the rest of the stuff we're going to talk about just doesn't even matter. But the other thing we can do is field by field. And you can see the example here that for every field on this object and for every profile, we have the ability to either grant or remove read access and grant or remove edit access to field by field. And we do that for things like, HIPAA compliance. We do it for social security numbers. We do it for credit cards. So there's a lot going on at the profile level and at the permission set level to think about, just to guarantee, and part of the guarantee that you're getting the results you expect. Part of the reason to share all this is that if you need to troubleshoot when something isn't working the way that you expect it to. So, so we just took a look. There are profile controls on objects and fields. And if we wanted to remove somebody's ability to delete records, that's another thing we might like to do. I have a profile set up here, and it's called custom sales rep or something like that. So if I come into this profile, I might want to remove their ability to delete data, because that's another thing that impacts reporting. I've never really liked giving delete permissions on opportunities. Somebody can write, Slack me and tell me they want to delete an opportunity rather than just letting them do it willy-nilly. But imagine every single object in your system is listed here. So there's a lot of objects where these controls live. And I can see that this particular profile everyone has read, create, edit, delete permissions. And if I edit the profile and remove their ability to delete, that sort of further guarantees that the reporting data will be what I expect. So this should be driven by your business need, whether you allow people to delete or not. A lot of companies just don't want people to delete opportunities because all the history gets deleted too. All right, so why don't we move on? Let's talk about folders. So once you've actually given people the ability to go to the reports tab and go to the dashboards tab, what do they see on those tabs? Well, that's all controlled by folders. And in Lightning, we have the ability to nest folders 4 levels deep. So sometimes that can be a little bit, it's like you see the tip of the iceberg, but you have no idea what's underneath. So if I go to the reports tab, I don't think I have a lot of folders. So if I come to the reports tab and I select folders, it looks like I've got a handful here. There's no way to tell if there are 50 nested folders or more in any one of these. There's no way right on the top level. And you can see here I have a folder called top level test. If I click on that, and then there's basically an empty folder that has a folder called second level folder. And I could click down further and I could create another nested folder or more. It doesn't have to just be one. So this is third level A, and I'll save that and I could create another one. Now, when you're creating these folders, it sort of depends. At the top level, when you create it and save it, it brings you into the folder. From the second level on, it doesn't bring you into the folder, which can be a little odd. So we're just stayed in the second level folder, and I'll go ahead and create a second folder in that second folder. I think I need a writer for my but with better wording. All right, so this is so I now have 2 subfolders within the second level folder and so on. An important thing to know is that there's pretty rudimentary navigation within the folders, right? So it's basically this little breadcrumb thing up here in the top. And we kind of have to teach our users about that. We have to teach our users about a couple things. So when they first go to the reports tab and load the tab, they just see a bunch of reports and they can see which specific folder something's in, but there's no way to tell that this is 5 levels deep or whether there's 4 levels deep, this particular folder, right? There's no way to tell on the top. And then if I come to my list of folders, I can't really tell that there are subfolders here. There's a little bit to just teach users about navigating. And once you dig into a folder, that now there's the breadcrumb to get back to the all folders. And if I dig into a second level folder, now there's an ellipsis and breadcrumbs to get back up one level and so on.
So Carol had a question about kind of the naming convention, I suppose. They ask, should you append top level 1 of 4, then 2 of 4, 3 of 4, 4 of 4, so it's clear how many folders are under and which you're looking at?
I think that would be hard to maintain. So I like how you're thinking, Carol. I think the trick would be maintaining that as life goes on and we add more stuff in the system. So there's probably another thing. Also, we'll talk about sharing next, and that may impact naming more than trying to do this. I just wish Salesforce would put a little number next to it to say how many items are in a folder, because they could do that. That wouldn't be a big stretch for them. But I like how you're thinking, Carol. So sharing is done only from the top level folder. And this is an important thing to know and an important thing to think about when you're creating the hierarchy of folders on your report or dashboard tabs. And I should actually mention the reports tab and the dashboards tab, the way folders work is identical. So if you learn one, you know the other. So the sharing is done only from the top level, and there are 3 types of sharing. So basically there's 4. There's no access. And then there are 3 levels of sharing you can give: view, edit, and manage. And for most users, in most cases, I'm just going to give them view access to a folder. And the reason is I don't want people mucking up, making changes, because they make a little subtle change and they save it and they don't realize they're changing it for everyone, or they're changing it and it breaks the dashboard. So most of the sharing that I'll do in folders is view only. And then for a select few set of users who might be super users, I might give them edit, which allows them to make changes to the items in the folder. They could delete items, they could add items, and then manage allows them to rename the folder, control sharing on the folder, and they can even delete the folder if they want. So manage is kind of a superpower when it comes to folders. So I think I've got a simple, very simple thing here. Let's go through. Given the downturn in the economy, we have a new focus on retaining existing customers. A customer success team's been set up in a hurry. And we have a global team, and then we have staff working in Asia Pacific and EMEA, and they each need homes for reports. So we're going to create 3 folders and then deal with the sharing. And there's probably 2 ways you could consider building this out. So the first would be to, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's create a folder instead. Let's call this customer success global. And I'm being very specific with the naming so that alphabetically things work. And right away, I'm brought into that folder, and I might create another folder called Customer Success Asia Pacific. And I could create another folder while I'm in this folder called Customer Success EMEA for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And you control the sharing at the top level. So if I come up here and I click down the down arrow for the action menu and choose share, I do have the ability to share this with other users, but it's going to share all of the folders controlled by this one level. And so it prevents us from saying only the Asia Pacific team sees the Asia Pacific and only the EMEA team sees the EMEA. So I want to build this in two ways. I ahead of time created three roles. And if I go look in my roles, you can see that I have roles for all of this. And I might in fact, I might do role and subordinates here. So I just have to create one, customer success global. So all of the roles below customer success will have a view access. Kind of a rookie mistake here is to get this far and click done. Nothing changes if you do that. You actually have to click the share button and see your folders folder sharing get added below. Now, when I click done, they will suddenly be able to see this tree of folders. So if for some reason you need to share Asia Pacific and EMEA separately and they shouldn't see each other's stuff, you'd actually probably create top level folders for each one of them, because there is no way within the nested folder structure. So if I come into this lower level folder here and I go to sharing, you can't control the sharing. It just lets you view it. So there's no way to set it up separately. And this impacts how you set up and name your folders, really. All right. So one other thing that folders have an impact on is something called collections. Collections is part of the analytics tab. The analytics tab has been in beta for a year. It's now coming out in the summer 23 release as generally available. You've probably heard me say GA before, and that just stands for generally available. So it's just part of the release. This is a summer 23 pre-release org that I'm in right now. I have 11 days left on my trial, so I've got to hurry up. In fact, it's going to die right before we do right before the next dojo. That's too bad. I'll have to set up another one. But if I go to the analytics tab, I can see that there's a new feature here called collections. Collections allow us to create ad hoc groups of reporting assets, 2 dashboards and 3 reports, put them together and then share them. I have a collection called sales planning. And you can see that there are previews for the items, not all of them for whatever reason, but some of them. So I've got a couple of reports here and it looks like a single dashboard. Some of the reports have charts and so on. And what's interesting is on this list, it says the name of the item and then it says what folder it's in. So already I know there's going to be a problem when I share this collection, that this one here's private reports is in a folder that other users can't see. So there are 8 items in this particular collection. And if I come up, it looks just like folder sharing. I can come up and share with other users. I've already shared it with this guy, Bob Smith. Now, when Bob looks at this collection, I know right off the bat, he's only going to, at the most, he'll see 7 because one of these items is in my personal folder and I'm a different user than Bob. But the reality is some of these other folders like sales and marketing dashboard reports and sales and analysis dashboard, these may also not be visible to Bob. So I thought, hey, just for laughs, why don't we actually log in as Bob? And let's actually see what it looks like. And this is going to be the reality for your users when you set this up, that and you roll out and you teach people about collections, that the collection visibility to collection items is dependent on visibility to stuff in folders. So if I log in as Bob, and I don't know if you've seen the grant login access before, it's kind of a handy thing. So I'm now logged in as Bob Smith. And already there are only 2 items on this collection, and I embedded the collection in the homepage. I'll show you how to do this in the next dojo. But if I go as Bob to the analytics tab and I go to the sales planning, look, there's only 2 items here. So collections is amazing, but it is dependent on folder sharing. And so when you create a collection, be aware of the items you're sharing uh, and what folders they're in. Think about who the intended audience is. Oh,
Uh,
okay. So you asked the question, can you show us that grant login access thing? Sure. So I'm going to log out as Bob, and I'll have to log back into the org. And thankfully, it remembered my username because I wasn't going to. Was that what you're going to ask about, Kyle?
so Lori had a question. Is it possible to create a new primary folder and move other folders into it? An example being creating an annual recap folder and moving each previous year's folder into that.
Awesome question. I think the answer is no, that we can't move folders, but I could be wrong. I think we can't move them, but I'll just double check real quick. So this first question of grant login access. So only admins can do it. And if it's turned on in your Salesforce org, what you see is a login link to the next to individual users. So I'm logged in as this guy, David. I can't log in as myself. So that's -1 right there. But then I have 2 other users who are set up who have active licenses, and I can log in as them because this is turned on in my org. There is a setup step. I think it's under security somewhere to turn it on for all users. I think it's off by default in orgs, but it is something that you can turn on. If you search for grant login access, you'll find an article, which is exactly how I did it on this org. Just find an article and figure out where it's probably called like manage login access. One of you already knows, I'm sure. Manage login grants login. Okay, here we go. Login access policies. It's probably a checkbox. So administrators can log in as any user, and it's enabled in this org. I had to enable it to be able to do what I was just doing. Awesome. Okay. All right. So we've already taken a look at folder permissions on collections. So I want to talk about data visibility for a little bit. So when you buy Salesforce, everybody can see everything, everybody can edit everything. It's like this lovely moment of group hug. And then at some point, data gets stolen and everything gets locked down really quickly. And the act of locking down who sees what can be done in a very harsh way using profiles, like we saw earlier, that you could literally hide an object. You could hide all the data in an object, or you can hide certain fields on an object. You do that with profiles. But as far as who gets to see what, if their profiles allow it, then there's the rest of the data in the system. So you might have a million accounts, and who should see? Should everybody see everything or not? Well, the answer is often not. And when we talk about that, there are a couple of controls that support who sees what. So one of them is record ownership. So if you own a record, you sort of have this inherent right to see the record, right? It kind of makes sense that if you own it, you can see it. All records in Salesforce have an owner. There is one slight exception of child objects in a master detail relationship. Um, and some records might be owned by a queue instead of a user, so that's another consideration. But ownership comes with privileges. You have the ability to read the record, edit the record, and delete the record if you own it, unless we make some other changes. But typically, profile changes, but typically that's true. When you start wanting to talk about hiding data, so let's say that we have a team of summer interns and we really like the summer interns, but we don't trust them with our pipeline data. You might be a publicly traded, you might be at a publicly traded company and not, you just can't let people see the data. So what you're going to do is you're going to come into the org-wide defaults and you're going to lower the level of access object by object. So there are 4 levels of access. There's private, public read write, and public read write transfer. And those should be pretty self-explanatory. Most of them are public read write out of the gate. So that means everybody sees everything and everybody can edit everything. And as organizations grow and mature, there's all kinds of reasons why they don't want that. And you start lowering the level of access. over to the right here, we have a screenshot of the sharing settings. This is under setup, and it's something an admin would update. And we can see a list of objects like leads, accounts and contacts, accounts and contracts, contacts, opportunities, etc. And you can see the default internal access and the default external access being people coming in through a community. So, by default, everybody can not only see all leads, but they can edit all leads and they can transfer all leads. Yikes. So you could have a bunch of fraternity brothers that you've just hired to take sales jobs, and they've got their headsets on and they're on the phone all day, and they start stealing each other's leads because they think it's fun. Well, we may not want that. And all of that is controlled under setup, and it's by an admin. So if I come under setup, scroll down and go under security, and this list gets longer and longer. But if we go to sharing settings, this page pulls double duty. There are 2 of 4 main who gets to see what data controls on this one page. There's the org-wide defaults on this page. And then further down, we'll talk about sharing settings, sharing rules in a minute, but there's also sharing rules. And these go hand in hand. So if I want to restrict the ability to do things with leads, I can come in here and I could lower the level from public read write transfer to public read write, public read only, or private. If you lower this to private, you're probably going to want to swing back around and handle the exceptions. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to private. This is just a simple dev org that I have access to. It actually takes a little bit of time for Salesforce to flush the old permissions and reset the new permissions. But while I'm waiting for this to get updated, I could scroll down here and I could make updates to the lead sharing rules to handle exceptions to the org-wide defaults. So it's org-wide defaults. They set the baseline level of access to the data in your system. Then there's something called the role hierarchy. The role hierarchy is like an org chart. It's not exactly an org chart, but it's sort of close. Most users will be or should be assigned a role. Everybody can have one role in the role hierarchy. And this controls something called record roll-up. So if one of you is my boss and I own a lead because of record roll-up, and if you're in a role higher than me in the hierarchy, you're going to be able to see that lead as well, along with your own leads and along with any others that roll up to you. So there's a hierarchical notion here that people higher up in the organization see more data. And this is part of you choosing the right user to be the running user on a dashboard. You want to choose somebody who's high enough in the organization that they have that visibility to all the records that you expect to be reporting on. So the role hierarchy is part of setting up the data in your system and the data visibility. And then there's something called sharing rules. The sharing rules are the exceptions to the org-wide defaults. There are 2 kinds of sharing rules. There are explicit ones, and then there are criteria based. So there's based on who owns the record or based on criteria. And you could say, share all the accounts in Texas with this group. Or you could say, share any accounts that are owned by people in Texas with this other group. And these handle the exceptions to the org-wide default. So all of these things control who sees what in your system. You may have somebody who's running a report, and when they look at the data, it's different from their colleague, and they want to know why. And these things may impact why they don't see the same data. All right, why don't we just pause here? I'm sure there are more questions.
Yep. Donna had one. You mentioned profiles that were changing. Will Salesforce be changing roles as well?
I haven't heard that about changing roles. What I've heard, I saw at like TDX back in March out in San Francisco, and there were rumblings about it at Dreamforce last year, that there's this move to embrace permission sets, and there's another thing called permission set groups, to essentially like decouple isn't the right word, but move a lot more of the permission set type stuff into permission sets off of profiles. So it's going to take a few more years for them to pull that off, but I haven't heard about that same thing for roles. So that's a great question. So this stuff on this page, and I'll just reload the page and set up. This is something an admin does, and you don't typically change it very often. But now leads is private, That means a minute ago, Bob Smith could log in and see everybody's leads, could edit everybody's leads, and could transfer and take ownership of everybody's leads. Now, a minute later, he can only see his leads plus the leads of anybody below him in the role hierarchy. Let's say he's a summer intern. There is nobody below him in the role hierarchy. So suddenly he's alone on a little island by himself. And if he runs a report on all leads in the system, he will only see the 6 leads that he owns from that moment on, until we come down and create some sharing rules. And we might want to create a sharing rule that says share all customer. That's not a good example. So if we were talking about accounts, we might say share all customer accounts with people on this team. But for leads, I could say I could do something. So leads owned by people who are in the customer success. Maybe somebody in Asia Pacific owns a lead, and we want to share it with the people in EMEA. And so when you create these lead sharing rules, they're one direction. And they're explicit. Any leads owned by anybody who's in the customer success APAC role is shared with users who are in the customer success EMEA role. So we would create a sharing rule that says, share leads owned by APAC with EMEA. And we might create it the other way around, and I would probably clean this up and spell it nicely and stuff. I might give it a description. So if I go ahead and do this, this will now calculate and it'll redo the sharing, and it'll impact those users in EMEA. Suddenly they'll see the APAC leads. And it's very easy to create lead sharing rules. You might have many of them in the list, but all right. So I didn't want to go too deep. I feel like I went a little deeper than I thought, but just to introduce these as topics. These are the big 4. We talked about record ownership. We talked about org-wide defaults. We talked about sharing rules, and we talked about the role hierarchy. Well, there are a couple of other ways that people see data, and you might have a situation where you expect somebody to see something on a report and you look over their shoulder and they see a whole bunch more than you expected. Well, that may be true because of teams. So teams is another feature in Salesforce. There are 3 teams functions that come out of the box: account teams, opportunity teams, and case teams. Each one of them needs to be enabled by a sysadmin. And you can see my screenshot over here on the right that I've just got a little simple checkbox to turn this on. To enable team selling. And once it's enabled, you're asked a question: do you want to put this on page layouts? And if you do, then there's a related list. Now, if you think of teams, they kind of do 2 things. One is they give people access to records. Another is that they give them recognition for a job well done on something. So Laura Garza is an account manager on this opportunity, and we might have somebody else who's a pre-sales consultant and another person who's an executive sponsor. And we're giving them access to the records, and we're giving them recognition for their work on this opportunity. So this is another way that people are given access to the records in your system, and this impacts reporting. So there's 3 types of teams. I'm curious, is there anybody using any of the teams for folks that are on the call? Opportunity teams, account teams, or case teams? So Donna says she's using account teams. Carol's got opportunity and account teams, etc. Cindy says no. And it's sort of all over the place. But this is another one of those things that, and thank you guys for sharing. It's great. Controls who sees what in your system, and again, impacts reporting. There is another feature it was called manual sharing. I think it's now called user sharing, or maybe it has another name. But it basically, as soon as you lower the level of access to sharing on one of the objects using org-wide defaults, a button is available called the sharing button. And actually, let's go see if it's there on leads. So I lowered the org-wide defaults on leads to private. And so a button is now available. If I come back to the leads object and I go look at a lead, we'll see, is the button here? No, it's not. It probably just needs to be added to the page layout to see it. But what this button does is it basically allows the user to share this randomly with someone else. Somebody who can the people who can do manual sharing is a record owner, somebody above them in the role hierarchy, or an administrator. This is an exam question, by the way, just as a secret. If you take the admin exam, this is usually a question. And this is the answer to who can edit teams as well. The record owner, somebody above them in the role hierarchy, or an administrator. So this is the answer to a few questions. But basically, this could throw off your reporting expectation if suddenly somebody on the Australia sales team shares a record with somebody in North America, and you didn't think about that when you're creating your report filters. Suddenly there's an extra deal in the pipeline that isn't normally there because it's owned by somebody in Australia and they happen to share the record. And so there are just things we need to think about when doing reporting, that our users may have uneven access to records and may thus see different results. This is one reason that dashboards introduce the concept of the running user, which basically standardizes. Everybody who looks at that dashboard will see it as if they're Tina, the VP of sales operations, and through her permissions. That's what one of the things that a running user does for us. All right. So we've talked about a whole bunch of stuff. We have time for questions. These are things that impact your access to reports and dashboards, your visibility of reports and dashboards, and then what data do you see on reports and dashboards. There are actually other features as well. There was an ancient feature that I think is only in Classic called divisions that impacted who sees what data. There's another feature more recent, I'll have to think of the name of it, that is basically an overlay that basically controls who sees what. So there's a lot of stuff there, and if you guys think of any others, please throw them into the chat. I thought to share that I suddenly have a book on Amazon, and I just had this really special moment a week or two ago that I saw this thing on Amazon that I've just done somehow that took 18 months. So I've talked about it a few times in the dojo, but I just thought to share with you that I do have a book coming out. It'll come out either the end of June or early July. And I'm working to make sure it's updated through the summer 23 release. But I think you all need a 300 plus page book on reporting. So I'm just teasing. You don't need a book, but thought to share that with you since we're spending a lot of time together on reports and dashboards. I also have a class coming up July 12th and 13th. Oh, Andriana asked the question, what animal is that and why did you pick it? I didn't pick it. O'Reilly is my absolute favorite tech book publisher. And for years, they've always had a black and white drawing. I used to call it a woodblock print of an animal right on the cover. So this is a Joffrey's cat, which is a wild cat that's native to South America. It's in the leopard family, and it's a small cat. So aside from being allergic to cats, I think it's great. I just think it's cool. But this is my favorite publisher, and they've always had animals on the cover. And since they've been around for 50 years, things like platypus, all the cool animals are gone. All right, so Valerie asked a question. I've tried to schedule a dashboard subscription, and for whatever reason, neither me or the recipients receive the dashboard to our email. So one thing that prevents people from subscribing users is that the dashboard's in a folder that they can't see. But as far as not receiving it, the only thing I can think of is spam. But I'm guessing you've probably already checked spam. So in Lightning, they also go on forever. In Classic, if you happen to set up a report like a dashboard subscription in Classic, there's an end date, and the end date was always by default a month from now, and it would stop. And that would be one reason it could stop. But I'm assuming you're probably working in Lightning, Valerie. So it's probably not that. In Lightning, when you set up a subscription, it literally goes on forever. And I get more junk emails from all the orgs I've worked in, emailing me stuff. But the other thing I could think of is spam. And then if there's any other potential filtering that your organization is doing to catch things before they get to your inbox, that might be something to log with support. And if they come back with an interesting response, I'd love to hear it. So I mentioned the training I have coming up July 12th and 13th. We'll spend 2 days on it. That's a really important thing, the access to folders, Valerie. So thank you for sharing that. Normally, you can't share with the user if they don't have access to a folder. It's possible that the access to the folder changed after you created the sharing. Maybe that somehow broke it. I doubt it, but just it's possible. All right, so I mentioned the 2-day class I'll teach. We have upcoming Dōjō sessions on May 24th, the summer 23 release for report and dashboard stuff. And then June 14th, I realized, 3 years in that we haven't done multi-currency yet. And some of you use that. So we'll talk about the impact of multi-currency on reports and dashboards. What other questions do you guys have? Has anyone encountered any of these issues that we talked about today, either the permissions or folder access issues or data visibility that impact their reporting? Yeah, Cindy, I find it complex as well. I tried to keep it simple, but invariably, you end up getting into the weeds. So there are 2 questions about the recording. Kyle will download the recording and process it. It's usually within a day or 2 that we'll have the recording online. So Bonnie shared, it's usually folder permission issue. Yep, I agree. Folder permissions really get in the way. Please be intentional about your folder sharing. Your senior leadership does not, I promise you, does not need to see every report and every dashboard in the system. It's just overwhelming to them. They end up not finding anything. If you're able to come to the 24th session, we'll talk about the analytics tab, which is becoming generally available in the summer 23 release. There's some pretty sophisticated searching that's added with the analytics tab. So it's worth us diving in. We'll go a bit deeper on collections in that session as well. Awesome. All right. I don't know if there are any more questions. Thank you for joining the Dōjō. Hope to see you back. In the meantime, good luck with your reports and dashboards. Thank you, Kyle.
Of course. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We hope to see you again soon.